Hi, Bonnie again with Timeless Themes, stories from the Hebrew and Christian Bible. Today we have the story of Jesus in the temple. Now last week when we left off our story, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph were way down here in Egypt. But you remember that there was that King Herod died, and they felt safe to go back again. So they started their long journey up through, but they didn't stay in Bethlehem. They went all the way back to Nazareth, where they had started from when they first went to Bethlehem. And Nazareth was not a very rich area, and Joseph was not a rich man. He was a carpenter, and he picked up work wherever he could. But in the story today, about once a year, a lot of Jews made the journey down to Jerusalem where the temple was. And let me show you what the temple is, so you have an idea. Herod wanted to make, now this temple, here is the middle part here, and that was an original temple. That, remember those Babylonians that came and got the Jews and took them away for hundreds of years? Well, they burned down the temple, but when they finally got back, they rebuilt it. But it wasn't good enough for Herod. He wanted something a lot more showy to glorify him. Now remember, Herod was a Jew too, but he wanted it to say, oh, Herod built this temple and it was wonderful. He had 35 acres. That's a lot of land. And he had it walled in, and all kinds of things were there. They had meeting rooms, they had a women's court, they had this huge court around here that anyone could go in, so they called it the Gentile court. And then this place was still the most high holy place they had right in here. And it was very, very elaborate with these balustrades all around. And only Jewish men could go in here. Oh, they had baths, ritual baths, where they took to purify themselves before they went in too. So they'd been working on it for 46 years, and they didn't finish it until about 30 years after Jesus died. So it took a long time to build this temple. Okay, let's go to our story today. And so after they got back to Nazareth, now let me tell you a little bit about the type of houses that they had when Jesus was growing up. They were very simple. They had probably bare floors. Sometimes they might have had a woven rug on it. They had baskets for their food. They probably did a lot of cooking outside. It didn't get terribly cold there. They had earthenware jars for their water, which they had to go down and get either from a well or from a river every day. It was a very hard life that they had. But children were generally, even though they helped out with chores, they were free to go and play. And they were taught, and Jesus was a Jewish boy, so he was taught all those stories that we learned about all this year. He was taught all those stories. He knew all those. And he was a pretty smart little boy as he was growing, and we're told that he was kind. When a Jewish boy gets to be 12 years old, they have something called a bar mitzvah, and that gets them, that's how they go into adulthood. Once you've had your bar mitzvah, you go into adulthood. In Jesus' day, only the boys had it, but nowadays girls have it, and it's called a bat mitzvah. And so, anyway, remember that map that I showed you of going from Nazareth to Jerusalem? Well, a lot of people would go there on Passover week. And Passover week, that was back from Moses' time when they celebrated when they passed over all the Jewish boys because they put blood on the door so they wouldn't kill them. And they still celebrate Passover to this day. So a lot of people went to the temple, especially if their boys were getting to be that age, that 12-year-old age. So our next scene is, and they went together in a caravan, and they loaded up their donkeys, and they took food, and they took bedrolls to sleep on, and I imagine they had a good time. The kids played with each other, and the women cooked together, and the men talked together, and so even though it was a lot of walking and a long and tiring way, I imagine that they had some fun and enjoyed just the togetherness of doing that. Okay, let's go to the temple now. This is like the courtyard that anybody could go in. And so now they've been, and the story doesn't really tell us what they did there about the bar mitzvah. All they tell us is that they started home. And they're in this big caravan, and they let the kids all play together. And suddenly, they'd gotten so far on the journey, and they realized that Jesus wasn't with the other children. And, oh my God, where is he? And so they had to turn around, Mary and Joseph, and go all the way back to try to find, and they went, the last place they'd been was the temple. So they went, and there they found Jesus in the temple, talking to all these elders, and asking them questions, and telling them stories, and he really knew a lot. He was, I would say, kind of showing off all his knowledge, but asking them questions too. And Mary and Joseph came in and said, Jesus, where have you been? We have just been frantic with worry over you. We all left, the whole caravan left, and you didn't come with us. And he said, oh, Mother, Father, this is my business. This is my business to know all of this. This is my Father's house. Father, he's referring to there in this story as God. So they took Jesus and they took him home that long way. Okay. And we don't know, it doesn't tell us if what happened. But I don't imagine they were very happy with that they had to go all that way back. I'll tell you a little funny story that happened to me in real life. There were 3 children in my family, and our minister had a little girl that I liked a lot, and I asked if she could come home with me that day, and my parents said okay, so that we cleared it with her parents, and got in the car, and my father looked back and counted 3 heads, and off we went to home, and we got home, and my dad said, where's Eddie? Eddie was my little brother, the youngest of us. And he had just counted 3 heads and hadn't noticed that one of them wasn't his son, so he had to turn around and go back to church, and there was poor little Eddie standing on the church steps with one of the elders of the church waiting for us. So we took him home and have told that story ever since. It was like Jesus being left at the temple. Okay, so that's the first temple story that we're told. Now, this is another temple story that our curriculum goes with, and this is when Jesus was an adult. And in this temple at that day, they required an animal sacrifice. They were still sacrificing animals on the altar. You remember some of those Hebrew stories about that. Well, a lot of those people that had come from a far distance couldn't bring the animals with them, so they sold. Remember that big courtyard I showed you? They sold animals, and then they also had to pay money for them, and they had to be a certain kind of Jewish money. And these people came from all over, and every little town had different kinds of money. So they had people there in that courtyard who changed the money into the type that was accepted by the priests there, and they were called the money changers. See these bags of money there? And they would change them. But some of them weren't very honest. And they were, like, if they were supposed to give them 2 shekels or 2 half shekels, maybe they would only give them 1. And so they were cheating them out of it. And these people were poor. They didn't have much money to begin with. I can't even get these animals on here. These are the animals that were being sold for sacrifice. Maybe they'll stay up there. And here's people that are coming in and trying to do this. Well, Jesus was coming with his friends. Now he's an adult. And he was coming to pray. And here is all this noise and commotion. There's animals. There's these money changers saying, here, I'll give you money. I'll change your money for you, and yada yada, all this. And he said, this is where we're supposed to worship and pray? This doesn't seem like it. And so he got really angry. Anger is one of our themes today. And he said, all of you get out of here. Just get out. This is my Father's house, and you have made it a den of thieves. And he got so mad. He went and he just tipped over the table, and all the money rolled all over the place. And whatever he had in his hand here, he was trying to get them out of there, get those animals out of there, so that they could all worship in the temple. And so that's the second story about the temple and Jesus, and how he chased out the money changers because they weren't honest, and the people were so poor that they couldn't even afford it. Okay, let's go back over to this, and I have a song, as usual. And it kind of goes, the first part of it goes over what we did last week, baby Jesus, and going to Egypt, and in the temple. This is today's, and then the next one will be about the money changers. And so, Kristen and this is the chorus. Amen, 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 amen. That's pretty easy. And it all has the same tune. The verses has the same tune as the chorus. So, Chris and I'll sing it for you. Let's see if we can do it. Amen, 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 amen. See the baby Jesus lying in a manger on a Christmas morning. Amen, amen. See them flee to Egypt, hiding from King Herod. See them back at Nazareth. Amen, amen. See him in the temple, talking to the elders. See him ask them questions. Amen, amen. See him when he's angry,
Ask the money changers, cast them from the temple. Amen. Amen.
One more time.
Amen. 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 Amen.
And there are a lot more verses, but we'll keep coming back to that as we hear more stories about Jesus. Okay. Now, one of our themes today was anger. And I want to know if you think Jesus was right to go out and throw those tables out and chase everybody out of there. Was that a good way to handle his anger? Think about that. Sometimes we have to do things, and you may hear on television about protesters who are protesting things, and sometimes they get angry and throw things. And is that the right way to do things? I know with Martin Luther King, he always believed in peace, and Gandhi, and Jesus. Well, I usually we say Jesus, but in this case it wasn't. Here is a little chart that you could work on at home, and think about a time that you got angry, and write about what happened and what you did. I mean, all this staying at home and not getting to see friends and not getting to play, you might get angry sometimes about this. I do myself. Get irritated. Okay, you can write the way it was, and then maybe if now that you're thinking about it when you're cool, calm, and collected, is there a better way? What could you have done instead of what you did? Maybe you shouted. I've done that myself. Maybe there was a better way. Maybe take some deep breaths and maybe go outside and run or something. Maybe punch a pillow. What are some better ways that you can do? And the other thing that I wanted to show you today, the Jewish people and everybody that of all religions want a place to gather with people that believe like them. And so they build churches and synagogues and mosques and all kinds of buildings to gather in. And the Jewish people had built the temple, and King Herod made it bigger and better. So I want you to look at a few pictures that I collected of some different ones around the Toledo area. And maybe when you're out driving with your parents, you might see some of these. They can be very simple. This is one that was a one-room schoolhouse that they changed into a church. It can be very simple like that. Or this is probably the most elaborate one that we have in Toledo. It is the Holy Rosary Cathedral. It's a Catholic church, and it's very big and very beautiful. I thought this was a very unusual design for a church. I believe that's a Catholic church, but I'm not sure. And then this is the mosque for the Muslims, it's in Perrysburg, but it's called the Toledo Mosque for all the Toledo area. Now, everybody doesn't go to that like every day or every week. There are smaller places that they gather and pray, but this is where big celebrations are held. These are two of the Jewish synagogues in our area, and they have different designs on them. And this, you might recognize this one, but this was our old one. This was in downtown Toledo. It's still there. It's owned by some other people now, but it was our church when I first came here, and it was pretty big, but it also was really hard to maintain heat and cool. It wasn't very handicapped accessible. We didn't have places that it was on many different floors, and if a child had a disability, there was no way to get them up and down to their RE rooms. But it was quite beautiful in the sanctuary. And this is the one that we moved to, where we are now. So I thought maybe you might, here's another thing that you could do at home. What if we were just starting now a church, how would you design it? What would it look like? Would it be simple, or would it be elaborate? Well, let's see what future architects we have, and when we meet together again, I would like to see your designs. Next week, we're going to meet a new character. He is John the Baptist, and he was quite a character. So see you next week.